But yeah, I mean, as far as like policies, when it comes to like how can we structure a system that provides broad access while also ensuring that we are giving that access to people in the most need, right? Like medical cannabis patients are able to access low cost medicine because the markets are so open to reduce those costs, right? Only a limited number of producers, only a limited number of conditions to which you can qualify. Patients in Texas have a much harder access than patients in Oklahoma.
Sure.
And part of what allows patients in Oklahoma to have much, much better access is that the companies there are able to take advantage of larger economies of scale with, many, many, many more consumers. And that economy of scale allows them to lower their cost per unit of medicine.
We are back at the Emerald Conference, San Diego 2024. Meet Unshackled here with Andrew Livingston, one of the premier speakers at today's conference. I think they called you a keynote speaker.
I guess, yeah. It was morning. It was at 8:30 in the morning. So, but regardless, I'll try to razz up the crowd. But it's a scientific group. It's
They're not too rowdy.
Yeah. It's researchers, it's scientists, it's people in the testing space. It's a lot of high-end intellectual conversations, which is my fave.
I love coming here for that very reason, is that it's a little smaller crowd, but you get a lot of extremely intelligent people,
Absolutely.
thought leaders that are not just advocating, but also dealing with scientific issues. So my learning curve just shoots through the roof. So I love doing Meeta Unshackled here and finding out all these different things. So what did they have you speaking about today?
Yeah, so I talked about kind of the intersection of policy, markets, and scientific research, really with the focus on how cannabis and psychedelic-assisted therapy markets are going to be fundamentally different as regulated at the state level. So, let's say comparing Oregon and Colorado's, psychedelic-assisted therapeutic programs to their cannabis programs, quite different as it pertains to the number of consumers that will pass through that system, economies of scale associated with production, how the venue of consumption is done. So, one of them is cannabis is by and large a consumer packaged good. It is produced by companies which, create a branded product that is sold at a retail store. Where psychedelic assisted therapy, as regulated in Oregon at the state level, as well as being implemented in Colorado with the Natural Medicine Act, is essentially a drug assisted or amplified therapeutic services. So classical therapy, right? You're sitting down in a room with a therapist, talking you through your feelings, talking about your emotions, being there to help monitor you. But with the addition of a psychedelic. And so it's not like you're going to go to a facility and get some psilocybin mushrooms and take them home and then take them and go on a hike, right? Where you could do that with a cannabis product. You buy a cannabis edible and go on a hike and experience the sun a little brighter. And the tree's a little bit more whimsical. It's not going to happen with psilocybin in the same way there because it's a facilitated on-site use. And so that changes the type of market that's going to develop. That also then importantly changes the type of data that can be collected, right? Like, so, if we just look at, adverse effects, for instance, in cannabis, you're monitoring adverse effects only if someone's calling poison control because they took too much or they're going to the hospital or something like that. In psychedelics, that adverse effect is going to be seen, monitored, controlled, and able to be mediated and assisted, in the actual practice, in the actual session. You're also going to be able to see some of the beneficial effects maybe a little bit quicker than with cannabis, right? In cannabis, you only know the beneficial effects because people are coming back to purchase the product again, right? So that's some of the main differences. And then I talked about a little bit esoteric things about rescheduling and administrative processes there.
Yeah, and so I could go in lots of directions, but one thing I want to know: so consumer packaged goods, in the psychedelic industry right now cannot be purchased directly from these centers in Oregon and Colorado.
Well, yeah, you can't take them home. I mean, it's the facilitation centers.
I gotta show you what I have in my backpack.
Yeah, those are all this kind of gray market.
Is that illegal?
Yeah, this gray market has
Unshackled.
has really proliferated. In Colorado, there's decriminalization for the personal use,
Yes.
personal possession, and some sharing. In lots of ways that adult use cannabis programs allow for personal possession, cultivation, and sharing. Like you and I could grow my own cannabis, roll up a joint, and share it with you. In the same sort of way, in Colorado, I could grow my own psilocybin mushrooms and have you over my house, and we could eat them together, sort of thing. But I can't create a product from that and sell it.
Okay.
And so there has been a gray market that has proliferated during the implementation and things like that. But yeah, we're not going to have the sort of branded consumer packaged goods particularly for edible products and psychedelics as we have for cannabis.
And Oregon doesn't have those either.
No, Oregon doesn't even allow for the decriminalization of personal use in the same way.
Okay.
I'd have to double check because Oregon actually just recriminalized. Previously, Oregon had decriminalized all drug possession, and so things may have changed. Well, they have changed because the governor, I think actually today or yesterday, just signed a bill that recriminalizes that. It was an initiative that passed a few years ago. So I'd have to double check some of the status there. But no, their psilocybin access law didn't produce the same rights for home production and home use that Colorado's does.
That's interesting. So, one of the things, you and I both are students of the market evolution and the supply chain development in cannabis. Yeah. And we've seen these licensing structures pop up and these different models and inadvertent or intentional designs and this grand story that's occurred over the last 20 years.
Yeah.
What do you see happening in psychedelics? Will the lessons that we have learned in cannabis in regards to, say, like licensing caps, will they be transferred? Do you think they'll be transferred over to psychedelics? And where do you see that going?
So first, I think we have to question whether or not states have learned from previous experiences with cannabis.
Yeah.
I am constantly reminded that states implement the programs that they think are best. Mm-hmm. And in some cases, they learn from other states. But in some cases, I think they learn the wrong lessons. Or maybe that's just my own vantage point. But I think that it's also important to recognize the size of the markets are so different that I don't think a lot of the regulatory systems in cannabis are applicable. Now, there's some things that we can kind of port over. I was talking with a testing operator earlier today about how, they're adopting the same security requirements for testing labs for psychedelics as they are for cannabis. That makes sense in as much as it makes sense to have to have intense security requirements for cannabis testing labs. It's probably more onerous than is necessary.
Right.
I think that on the psychedelic side, I can't understate the importance of the fact that because it's not a retail store model, the market fundamentals are so different that porting over the same regulatory structure it is not going to be palatable for and I shouldn't even say palatable. It's not going to be financially feasible for the licensees because they just don't have as much revenue flowing through their business to pay for the operational costs if they institute the same set of operational costs as cannabis.
So what other Oregon, Colorado, what other states?
So California's working on a legislation right now. Massachusetts is going to be voting on it. I'm pretty sure in November. But yeah, essentially you're going to have a combination of the ballot initiative states, combination of some states or legislatures that are considering it. There's a pretty important stakeholder and constituency group with patients and veterans that are looking to access psychedelic assisted care. Now, what's interesting about this market, though, is that We are simultaneously seeing a federally authorized pathway through, MAPS, formerly MAPS Public Benefit Corp, now Lycos.
Shout
Eh,
out to Sue Sicily.
yeah, and their MDMA assisted therapy that is, I think going to be approved hopefully sometime later this year. And so that's going to be a significant importance in how it moves the market forward, because in cannabis, it's not like we had this simultaneous pharmaceutical development with state market regulation, right? Yes, there's a pharmaceutical product, Epidiolex, but that was produced out in the UK, GW Pharmaceuticals, and then purchased by Jazz Pharmaceuticals, and serves a different sort of community. Whereas, the psychedelic assisted therapy, whether it's Compass for psilocybin products or Lycos with MDMA, and even if you want to consider esketamine with ketamine clinics, that's already legal.
Yep.
That's a different sort of interesting pathway, as it doesn't necessarily bisect, but it runs parallel. And consumers at some point, if California passes some of this legislation for psychedelics, they may have the option in the future of going to a federally licensed MDMA approved, MDMA assisted therapy, and going to a federally illegal but state licensed MDMA assisted therapy, which is going to be interesting.
That is really interesting. As I'm thinking about this, I took 12 people down to Oaxaca, Mexico, to San Jose del
Yeah.
Pacifico, where they could choose to use the local mushrooms
Yeah.
if they wanted to.
Yeah.
It's a very libertarian oriented approach. And I'm going to do it again. What do you see happening internationally in this realm? Have you had a chance to research that at all?
Yeah. So I did some research on some of the Caribbean clinics, and then there's also Costa Rica.
Okay.
These right now with psychedelics, a lot of these are acting as essentially what I'm going to call it rather, than psychedelic assisted therapy. These are like psychedelic assisted vacation retreat centers,
Right.
which sounds awesome. If anyone wants to sponsor me and my wife to go to Jamaica,
We might have a trip coming up to Mexico if you want to join.
yeah, I'm talk to her about it.
It's a vacation.
Yeah, I mean, what it is it really is vacation, right? It's
Isn't
like
that therapy?
yeah, I mean, I took a vacation last weekend for the first time in a while away
Yes.
from my 2-year-old, and yeah, absolutely, it's couples therapy, and so it's like. I think eventually there will be psychedelic assisted couples therapy, but like, why not have that at a vacation resort? It just it augments the experience a little better or a little differently, right? We always talk about set and setting. It's hard to beat a set and setting of your relaxation on a vacation. So I think that most of that internationally is going to be essentially psychedelic assisted vacations.
Yeah.
Which is cool. That like totally fills a role. That is therapeutic in the sense of
That's what we're doing.
yeah. That's psychedelic. It's therapeutic in the way that like, relaxation is therapeutic.
Yeah.
It's not necessarily medically therapeutic, but I also know that historically, I mean, there's been like igobain medical or medically focused centers in Mexico dealing with addiction and stuff like that. So it also, I think, internationally serves as a place to get some of these therapies in areas where locally it may not be still legal in the United States or in Europe or things like that. And the reason that market works, where it doesn't necessarily work with cannabis, is because with cannabis you buy the product and you're consuming it. Normal consumers consume multiple times a week, right? If you're looking for a psychedelic journey, even someone who does that multiple times, they might do it a few times a year, or they might do it once a year.
Well, what about microdosing? Aren't people
That's a little different. Yeah. So it wouldn't work for microdose. I mean, international
Yeah.
markets, because it's like you need to access it all the time. So microdosing right now, the best way to provide for that is essentially in state level decriminalization.
Yeah, and I see personally, just because I try to understand substance use, substance abuse from a philosophical level and stuff. I mean, first of all, going back a second, the vacation, going on a vacation to consume marijuana or psychedelics is a much better vacation for your kids than going to Cancun and getting drunk and potentially date raped or beat up. Keep that in mind.
Yeah.
We've been brainwashed to believe that somehow alcohol is safe and these other drugs are dangerous. No, not compared to
No, I'd rather know my kid is on,
yeah,
in a facility enjoying themselves
right.
than, walking the streets
Which
in
is
Mexico.
look, I was and we'll get to the microdosing back in a second. I was a Nancy Reagan just say no kid.
Yeah.
I thought all drugs were evil, served no purpose whatsoever. Thought that marijuana was the devil's weed, all this stuff, and I have had to unravel
Yeah.
so much of that, and that those aha moments between 2012 and 2015 when I took a deep dive into substance abuse, substance use policy, and came to understand what the truth was. This was a wide awakening, and it blows my mind what alcohol has gotten away with, and with the commercialization and the messaging and the infiltration.
Yeah.
I mean, Alexander the Great drank a little red wine, fine, but he wasn't pushed at every single moment, every single event, different types of hard liquor, different types of beer, different types of cocktail mixes. I mean, it's insane the proliferation of the alcohol industry. Anyways, that's a side note. But I can see microdosing being something that is adopted just because my empirical experience with humans who microdose, who are who use it to be functional and excellent.
Yeah.
I can see. I mean, I can't tell you scientifically, what exactly microdosing does, but I can see microdosing being like coffee in the morning. You need coffee to pick you up. You need microdosing to balance you out.
Yeah.
Tea at night, you need it to relax. Cannabis at night, you need it to relax. Glass of wine at night, you need it to relax. It serves a purpose to balance yourself out to become excellent. I can see microdosing being that way. How do we get it there? What do we need to do?
Yeah. So my colleague and one of the founding partners of the firm, Josh Capel, has founded the Microdosing Collective, pushing policies for microdosing through some of these state programs. And I think that in order for us to create that opportunity, we need to create the demand for it. We need to there is the demand for it, but right now a lot of consumers that do microdose, they have their own supply. They're, grow themselves. It's a short, in some cases, it's a very short supply chain, right? Either they're producing it themselves, they're grinding it, they're drying it in their own little, they're producing their own, or they know the person who's producing it. There is a need to create the legal ability to have microdosing in order for it to proliferate, right? So we don't have that right now. There are none of these state programs that are pushing psychedelic assisted therapy that are considering it in a non-therapeutic administrative model, in a consumer packaged good model.
So maybe we should introduce an initiative in a state like, say, Arizona, where we allow for that to be done.
Yeah, so I've had this idea, and I talked to Josh about it. I've talked to some other people, in that one of the main problems that I see with psychedelic assisted psychotherapy and psychedelic assisted therapy at large is that it's expensive, and there's not really a way to reduce the cost through economies of scale, right? So you can, typically what that means, as businesses get bigger and the more and more products they produce, the variable cost of each of those products become less, and you can sell, your cannabis at a lower price per gram because you're a bigger company than if you have a small, right? But with psychedelics, because most of the cost associated with psychedelic assisted therapy is the cost of the therapeutic administration, the therapist actually spending their time, right? Like, you're not going to be able to lower that cost with more, maybe with group therapy and things like that. But as long as you have someone sitting there who's a licensed and trained professional, they're going to need to get paid for it, and it's going to be expensive. And so there's, really,
I'll do it for $50 an hour.
But even let's consider $50 an hour, right? So you have your preparatory session,
right?
You have your experiential session, you have your integration session. All told, you're probably dealing with at least 10 hours.
Good point.
Right? That's $500 just at $50 an hour. And therapists are, typically charge $100 or more an hour.
Right.
right? So even at $50 an hour, which is below the cost of any therapy, you still have $500 for a session. That's still more expensive than there is a correlation between people with
I'm starting to think that we're charging too little for our vacation in Oaxaca.
maybe I'm happy to talk about your economics about that.
I want to talk about the law, the legalities of it first.
But if we look at this, right, like it's hard to reduce those costs. You could maybe do it through, group sessions, but still there's some dynamics there. And really, either that or you have the therapists or the facilities providing their own discount programs. And that really they're just cutting to their own margins out of their own goodwill to provide, a sliding scale to patients. So that's a benefit. But one of the things I've been thinking about, I've talked to Josh and others, is that why don't we simultaneously legalize the commercial sale of microdoses, tax that, create a pot of money that we then utilize to provide grants to facilitation centers and therapists to provide free or low cost psychedelic assisted therapy to those in need. Because there is a correlation between people with the most significant most significant need for therapeutic services and their inability to pay for it.
I think that's a great idea.
Right? Because it's like if you have major mental health issues, it's much harder to keep a job and have a high paying job for your ability to pay for those sessions. Right? Like this is, why we have Medicaid importantly pay for therapy. And why there needs to be more of that. And it's because like they need, kind of some of these wraparound services beyond just pharmaceuticals. And if we are preventing access of psychedelic assisted therapy to those who can't afford it, we are not able to capture many of the people with the most significant need.
Absolutely. We should, Eric, we should do a whole series with him, Catching Up with Andrew, America's #1 cannabis and psychedelics attorney.
No, I'm not an attorney, but nerd. You can say nerd.
Yeah, sorry, nerd.
I always
policy expert.
Yeah, I always have to catch people on the. I work for lawyers, but I'm a
great law firm, by the way, and I much mad respect. I guess you're the drug policy expert. What's your official title there?
I'm the director of economics and research.
Okay, director. Well, kudos to them for bringing on a director of.
Yeah, well, I started, when we were 5 people. So it started a long time ago. I was just the little young gun who did policy and econ, and then I kind of made my own area at the firm for this, for market analysis stuff. But yeah, I mean, as far as like policies, when it comes to like how can we structure a system that provides broad access while also ensuring that we are giving that access to people in the most need, right? Like medical cannabis patients are able to access low cost medicine because the markets are so open to reduce those costs, right? If you have, let's say, a medical cannabis,
in my book, not open enough.
Not yet, but let's talk about it for a second. Like, let's compare certain systems, right? Like, if we look at the cost of medicine, let's say in a program like Texas, right? Only a limited number of producers, only a limited number of conditions to which you can qualify. The medicine is expensive, right? Patients in Texas have a much harder access than patients in Oklahoma.
Sure.
Which is a much more open, much more. It's still a medical program, but it's a lot more broad access. It's getting closer to an adult use sort of program. And part of what allows patients in Oklahoma to have much, much better access is that the companies there are able to take advantage of larger economies of scale with, many, many, many more consumers. And that economy of scale allows them to lower their cost per unit of medicine. If you have a really restrictive program, there is not as much demand, and the companies are going to have to charge a higher cost per unit because they can't take it at that advantage.
I like him, Eric. He's a free market guy. He's
So
about to get there.
yeah, I mean, I was actually back when they still had it. Before I joined the Amendment 64 campaign in 2012, the summer program
Yeah.
that I did in Washington D.C. back in 2012 was the Koch Summer Fellows program. So it was paid for by Charles Koch, part of the Koch brothers,
Right.
and that was kind of that interesting connection between libertarian conservatives and liberal drug policy reformers. One of my very, very good friends was a Koch Summer Fellow to work at the Drug Policy Alliance. So he was getting paid by Charles Koch to work at do a summer internship at a program that was originally founded by George Soros. It's just like that nexus point that comes there is drug policy, and kind of I sit in that center.
I know that sphere, that circle. Well.
Yeah.
So where are you off to next? And we're gonna have to catch up with you regularly whenever we bump into
Yeah,
one of these conferences.
I was happy to.
Anytime that you see me Unshackled, we're gonna be everywhere.
I'm always happy to chat.
And we'll do a little segment with you always, because you are one of the premier thinkers in this space.
Thank you.
Definitely on top of your game. Where are you going to next?
Conference wise?
Yeah.
Not really sure yet.
Not going to go to Benzinga maybe?
No. So the
MGM Pack? You're based out of Denver.
Yeah, I'm in Denver. So, I was potentially going to go to the NCIA conference on Thursday, but I think I might have to do some work given that I'm here. Flew out yesterday and flying back tomorrow. So I'm not sure if I'll be able to make it all day there Thursday. I'll hopefully try to make it a little bit. But, one of the advantages of being part of a pretty big firm with national reach is that we've got awesome attorneys and policy experts from around the country. A disadvantage is that I don't get to go to all the conferences. And so, we send different people to different places. And so, we've got, I think, a handful of people going to Benzinga. Sadly, I won't be one of them, but, it's also as a...
Since you're like the guy who puts it all together and does the research and analysis, they should have you everywhere gathering as much information as possible.
I mean, I do like to travel and speak. It's a little harder with being a parent of a toddler. But
congratulations.
Yeah, thanks. It's a good kid. But it's just one of those. I often go to places where I get asked to speak.
Yes.
And so thankfully I do get asked to speak at a bunch of different places around the country over time. But I don't always know, right? Like, so I didn't know I was coming here until about 3 weeks ago when Chris asked me to give the talk. So I just gotta, have the people at Benzinga or others be like, hey, can you give a keynote? And then I'll show up more places and we'll do more podcast conversations.
No, we love catching up with you, and I learned so much from talking to you. And this is one of the great things about coming to the Emerald Conference and conferences in general. Although Emerald and MJ BizCon, same company.
Yeah.
And MJ BizCon, like, things go so fast.
Oh yeah. Well,
here it's like a little bit slower. There's a little bit less
1,000
people,
times more people,
and people have good conversations. So that's one of the reasons why we like coming here. But yeah, so anytime you see Meet Unshackled, let us know. We'll get you on. Update the folks as to what you're up to. And how do people get in touch with you and reach you?
Yeah, so the best thing to do is to email me, a.livingston@vicentellp.com. That's the easiest way to contact me. You can also find me on LinkedIn. The problem is Andrew Livingston is a very common name, and I look like a normal white person. Yeah. And so if you type in Andrew Livingston Cannabis, I've been around in the game for long enough, you'll probably find me from there. But I only check LinkedIn probably about once a week. So if you hit me up with a message, it may take a little longer, but you can email me and I'll get it back to you quick. You can also call our offices or find us at vicentellp.com. And I'm always happy to chat with new people. If you think you want to be a client, awesome. I'd love to work with you. If you're a student or a researcher, happy to chat with you. And, if you meet me at a conference, I'm easy to chat with, and I'll keep talking to you for as long as you like.
Well, you're a young man. You're in a great place with a great firm, and you're a great thinker. So, as I stay in this cannabis industry, I really look forward to, or psychedelic. And I really look forward to.
And I do both.
The tracking, tracking and then following your progress and seeing where you end up and just watching what you do.
Thank you, Dimitri. Appreciate it.
Really cool. Good to see you. Thank you.
Always. Yeah.
It's been another episode of Meet Unshackled.